Hey there, EB here. Happy Thursday. It's been a couple weeks since I've talked to you guys and gave you an update. Obviously, last week you could see I had some shoulder surgery and got my bicep reattached and just got back from physical therapy, and it's gone real well. The recovery's much quicker than I thought it would be, although I still won't be able to do much for 6 weeks to make sure that the screw they attached my bicep tendon to the bone doesn't detach. But I got my bicep repaired. I got my clavicle clipped. I got my scapula burred and my labrum worked on. So that's why I couldn't do the weekly update last week. So let's just dive in. What's going on in Texas with the floods is just heartbreaking. I just cannot imagine as a parent to get that phone call about your daughter that you sent to this wonderful Christian camp, got washed away in these flash floods. It's extraordinary when you see the time lapse of the amount of water that came down in 50 minutes, and rose that creek 26 feet. Um, you know, we have to be ready for things like this. Obviously, never thought in the mountains last October in Asheville and all the way through Boone and Banner Elk that roads would be just torn up. You just never think of a hurricane happening, and certainly flash floods happen, but they got as much rain in 4 months as in that 50-minute period, which is just extraordinary. And our heart breaks for these people, and that's why we have to be really careful with Doge and what Doge is doing in cutting what they think is unnecessary expenditures. I read a book about the Galveston, Texas hurricane that came in the early 1900s, and it was supposed to go to Florida, and they had cut a lot of the scientists who do the analysis of these hurricanes, and they were this one scientist saw that it was going to veer off and go to Galveston, and he was screaming from the rooftops, but nobody believed him. There wasn't enough people in the Washington D.C. Weather Bureau office they had cut, and so Galveston, Texas, in this book was literally wiped out, and many, many, many people died. Well, it's kind of like the same thing here. Um, you know, Doge are made up of people, either the richest man in the world, and then backed up by the President of the United States, who is a multi billionaire himself. These people are making cuts that really do affect the lives of those that are marginalized or those that are living really on the edge. And they have no concept of what that means, what it's going to do to them, what it's going to do to these people. Or if you cut somebody in a job that his job is or her job is to gauge these storms or where they're coming or what's going to happen. Is it going to be 100-year rain or a 500-year rain? Um, that's the purpose of government. That's why we do have these governmental officials that do these very mundane, obscure jobs, but they're very, very much necessary. And you know, it seems ironic to me that the billionaires are cutting things that affect normal people, people that, live meal to meal or week to week. They just don't really have a concept of when you cut a SNAP program for veterans, what does that do to veterans when you already had Doge, who's really comprised of, you know, kids anywhere from 19 to 28 years old that really haven't experienced problems in their lives like the people who struggle economically making cuts. And so you have the Doge aspect of it, and then you have the aspect that people are fired from their jobs, and then there's no more funding. And we saw it's a known fact. Kristi Noem, the Department of Homeland Security, she, in order to cut expenditures, said that everything over $100,000 has to have her signature on it. Well, that held up FEMA for 3 days. Now, fortunately, Texas has a very robust emergency response system, but for FEMA to release money, it took 3 days because Kristi Noem had to personally sign the checks of anything over $100,000, and the amount of money that FEMA is going to have to put into Texas, and dealing with the relocation of these people and things like that, and defending lawsuits, which ultimately will be brought, will be far greater than that. So that's a huge thing. President Trump continues to rack up significant victories, diplomatically as well as domestically. Diplomatically, he had got the NATO countries to now contribute 5% of their ultimate gross national income and product, domestic income, towards the defense of the NATO alliance, which is something that he has been trying to get done since 2016. He got Iran and Israel to agree to a ceasefire, and it seems to have been holding for the last 2 weeks. He's on the verge of possibly getting Israel and Hamas to agree to a ceasefire, but I don't think it's ever going to happen, because the only way Israel's going to do that is if Hamas agrees it's not going to be the governing body in the Gaza Strip territory. They're talking about Gaza Strip being run by the Israeli Defense Force, and then other Arab countries taking in the Palestinians, which is essentially population displacement, which no Middle East country wants to do and has stepped forward to do, and then have other non-Palestinian Hamas or non-PLO people step forward and try to govern in separate quadrants in the Gaza Strip. But there's no question that if he gets the Hamas and Israel to agree to the ceasefire, and he gets the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, to sign the Abraham Accords, which were done in the first Trump term, done by Jared Kushner, where they recognize Israel's right to exist, he probably should get the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, I'm not a fan of President Trump, but I said a couple weeks ago, he's doing things that are very consequential, both good and bad. And if he can accomplish what nobody's been able to accomplish in the Middle East, that would be extraordinary. I'm personally stunned that we have not seen any retribution from Iran, other than that, show of a targeted bombing where they told us where they were going to bomb and get our people out of there. I really thought that there was going to be some terrorism incidents in synagogues across the world, or different United States consulates, but that hasn't happened, and that's a good thing. And it really looks like that the Middle East has, there's been a seismic shift. Iran is no longer the big bad boy of the Middle East. They've shown to be a paper tiger. They have no control over their airspace. Israel has wiped out Hamas, Hezbollah. They have tuned up Iran quite dramatically. The United States has done an amazing job in setting back the nuclear program of Iran. And I don't want to get into whether it's been obliterated or just damaged. To delay it for a year or two or more is a good thing. And if it ever comes back online, we'll bomb them again. So Iran, if you notice, China and Russia have not come to the aid of Iran, which is highly unusual. As far as Ukraine, what Russia is doing right now is disgraceful. They're releasing 250 drones a day with ballistic missiles. We had a little hiccup last week that Pete Hegseth, the Department of Defense cabinet official, he unilaterally canceled the shipment of weaponry to Ukraine that's already been approved, and said that United States stockpile is running low and we want to do an inventory and make sure that we're not giving away these weapons. He did that without the approval or notifying the White House. That was a problem. Trump immediately, after talking to Putin, Trump surprisingly in public said that Putin is he used the word bullshitter. He says nice things to you, he goes along, but after you hang up the phone, he immediately resumes his bombing of Ukraine. So we're starting to see Trump kind of seeing Putin for who he is, which is somebody that he cannot do business with. Now, if somehow he gets a ceasefire with Ukraine and Russia, then without question, I will be the first to say that, again, that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. And Israel was smart when Netanyahu came to visit earlier this week. He brought a letter that a copy of a letter that he had sent to the Nobel Peace laureates saying that Israel has nominated President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, which is flattering to President Trump, and it's something that he wants, and good for him if he does get it. Trump is winning on the border, in the courts, and in the schools, and he's racking up wins left and right, not only in the lower court, but certainly we're going to talk about what the wins are that he's getting in the Supreme Court. The Trump administration has discussed the possibility of accessing as much as $30 billion to build a civilian energy-producing nuclear program and easing sanctions to free up billions of dollars in restricted Iranian funds. This is all on the part of Trump to bring Tehran back to the negotiating table. Now, we remember when President Obama did the nuclear deal with Iran, and they released $6 billion of Iranian funds that were frozen. The criticism that President Trump lobbied against President Obama. Well, now he's talking about investing $30 million in a civilian nuclear thing and then releasing up billions of other dollars. So he had canceled the nuclear program of President Obama in his first term, and now he's trying to get the same thing done again. Let me explain the power of Trump. When we're talking about the big, new, beautiful bill, and we will talk about that right now, that passed both the House and Senate and signed by Trump on July 4th with big fanfare. In the House, Dan Bacon, and in the Senate, Thom Tillis voted against it, as well as Susan Collins from Maine. But Trump took to the airwaves immediately and said he's going to primary Thom Tillis, who's up for election next year. And Thom Tillis that day said, I can't fight this. He said, I'm going to vote against the bill, and he notified Trump that he is not going to seek re-election. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Donald Trump's Republican Party. You cannot exercise any independent criticism or thought. You must go along with the mainstream. Remember, only 27% of the people have supported the big, beautiful bill. The big, beautiful bill that's going to add $20 trillion to our debt over the next 10 years. Now, you have to understand that our president is a businessman. And if you look at his history of casinos and different hotel and condominium projects, every one of his casinos, he let his banknotes go in default and renegotiated those with the creditors. He either went into bankruptcy or he had them renegotiate the terms. Business debt is different than country debt. If Donald Trump believes that you could take out a loan and you can default it, and then the loan's so big that the creditor can't take over the project, then they have to come and negotiate with you. So it's just a business decision that he usually makes on whether to pay or not to pay a loan. Adding $20 trillion to the national debt will affect our credit rating, will affect the United States' ability to control money supply. But most importantly, we can't default on that debt. Like you can default on a car loan and you could say, come take my car. With the United States defaulting on debt, and that by that time it's going to be over $50 trillion, it's going to severely affect the economy of the United States. In the big, new, beautiful bill, tips and overtime will not be tipped. That's what Trump campaigned on. However, it's going to sunset at the end of his administration. So at the end of 2027, when he's no longer president, that's when it's going to sunset. So it's going to be left, this economic calamity for the next administration is going to be felt. So over the next 4 years, we're going to run up a ton of debt. All the work that DOGE did, all the cuts that DOGE did, were wiped out in tenfold by this new beautiful bill that was enacted. And there's supposedly going to be no taxes on Social Security. I don't personally have a problem with saying that able-bodied people that are going to get the welfare or the SNAP program, which SNAP is the free food, that they have to work some modest amount if they're able-bodied. That was done in Bill Clinton's time in 1994. So, um, the problem is, though, under the new beautiful bill, there a lot of people are going to have less reimbursements under Medicaid, and that's a real problem because a lot of the MAGA supporters of Trump are they don't realize it, are on Medicaid. And Trump broke his word because 2 weeks ago he said that I am never going to touch Medicaid. Well, the big new beautiful bill is shutting down rural hospitals, rural health clinics, where most of their patient base is Medicaid related. So that's that used to be the third rail of politics. You couldn't talk about Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. So you know, Trump evidently, he is a Teflon Don. Nothing seems to stick. Elon Musk is back blasting Trump. He said that every Republican that voted for the new bill, beautiful bill, should hang their head in shame. He said that he's going to primary those seats next year for those people that voted on the beautiful bill in those very uh, uh, middle of the road swing districts. And he's going to start the new party called the American Party, a party which I will join, by the way, because I'm a middle of the road type of Democrat on social issues and a middle of the road Republican on fiscal issues. So I think that it's crazy what he's doing. He can't outrun the president. He can't outblast the president. The president said, "What if I unleash Doge on Elon Musk's program?" The Tesla stock is through the floor. But he should have known this. Elon should have known this. Anybody that gets in Trump's orbit will suffer. You will go to jail. You have your reputation sullied. You will be subpoenaed before Congress. And it was only a matter of time before Elon Musk would come back again. And now he's saying that Trump is the devil. He's saying, he's really upset because the big, beautiful bill takes on hard against green energy. No more subsidies for solar farms, wind farms, took away the subsidies for electronic cards. He calls the Republicans the Porky Pig Party, but Trump says, "I'm going to have the last laugh." And I do believe that Trump will have the last laugh. Elon Musk says we're sacrificing new industry to reward old businesses. And that is something that I think is true. Again, Trump said that Elon may get more subsidies than any other human in history, and that without him, he'll have to pack up and head back to South Africa. The SNAP benefits that are being cut for veterans are already on top of the cuts that Doge has done to the Veterans Administration. So many veterans have spoken out and are worried about not only their health care, but they rely on the SNAP for free food. You know, I do think that Trump reversing Pete Hegseth's course on Ukraine is a huge, huge issue. I think he is starting to have enough about the platitudes he gets from Vladimir Putin, only to have Putin make him look like a fool the next day when Trump says, "I spoke to Putin, great conversation. He wants to get to the peace table." And then that night or next day, he blasts Kyiv or some other major city, Odessa, in Ukraine to oblivion. And I think Trump is also getting a little mad at what has happened with the Russian media. They're mocking him, and he's a guy that doesn't like being mocked. So he's reversing course on a lot of things that MAGA does not want, like Tucker Carlson or some of the other MAGA people, Steve Bannon, don't want the funding of Ukraine or don't want us to provide these weapons, whether the defensive or offensive weapons, to Ukraine. He reversed himself on bombing Iran. The MAGA people don't want that. Marjorie Taylor Greene was apoplectic over the fact that we bombed Iran. I wanted him to do it, and I applauded him for doing it. But he seems to be separating himself from the MAGA base. Trump says Israel will agree on a 60-day ceasefire terms. Um, we shall see on that. Again, Hamas has to agree to give up um, power over their government, and I'm not sure they're going to do that. I totally agree um, with what University of Pennsylvania did with stripping the medals off a swimmer, transgender swimmer Leah Thomas. I think that's a direct result of Trump threatening their funding. I think he's done a very good job on these things. It doesn't make sense to me. Transgender can compete in men's sports or compete in a transgender division, but not in women's sports. And that's men who want to become women. The Supreme Court, birthright citizenship, 14th Amendment decision is unclear. They didn't pass judgment on the 14th Amendment, whether it does provide birthright citizenship. And it does, ladies and gentlemen. It absolutely does by the wording of it. You're not reading anything into it. It does say that you were born on United States soil, except if you're an enemy combatant or you're a diplomat, you don't get U.S. Citizenship status. The Supreme Court said that what happens is that the lower courts can't enact a injunction that would be nationwide. They can only order an injunction in their own judicial district. It should be in the judicial circuit. We have like the Fourth Circuit, which is Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And then we have the First Circuit, Second Circuits. A judge should be able to bind their judicial circuit. I think that this Supreme Court, based on what I've seen from them the last 3 months, will reverse the birthright citizenship and say that the 14th Amendment only provided it to the sons and daughters of slaves, although that's not in the amendment itself. The Democrats will lose a whole slew of voters if children are 18 or 20 years old and were born in the United States going to college, and all of a sudden they don't become citizens. They're not citizens anymore because of birthright. This is all designed to cut the democratic rolls of people who have come to this country and want to vote Democratic. That's really why they are doing this. It's the Supreme Court just said that Trump also can wholesale fire departments that were funded and enacted by Congress, and do it on his own without getting correct congressional approval. So what they did is they said, we reversed the injunction. We're not passing muster on the fact that Donald Trump, through the executive power, is infringing on the legislative power. We're just going to let the case come up through its normal. Well, what's going to happen over the next 2 years before the case goes up is Trump is going to clean house in all these departments. And what happens if the Supreme Court reverses and says, no, that wasn't right, Donald Trump? What's going to happen to all these people who have moved on from these governmental positions and gotten new jobs? So our Supreme Court has turned political. Our Supreme Court is no longer doing original intent like Anton Scalia or Rehnquist wanted it to do, which is construe the Constitution as it is written. We just heard today that the criminal investigations have been opened by the FBI against Jim Comey, the former FBI director, and John Brennan, who was the CIA director under President Obama. This is clearly vindictive. It's clearly done, as Pam Bondi said she was going to do, to pay back for what the MAGA people think was the lawlessness of the Justice Department in persecuting, not prosecuting, but persecuting Donald Trump. I think it's a waste of time and money. They're going after these two for the Russia dossier, the fake Russia dossier. And so Pam Bondi wanted to certainly take the attention off of her, because one of the big things of MAGA is that they are conspiracy theorists, some of them, the QAnon people. And one of the big conspiracy theories was that Epstein didn't commit suicide in his jail cell. He was murdered, and that he had a client list, and that's why he was murdered, because he was, using it to blackmail very important people. And that there was 1 minute, like the Nixon tapes, there was a minute missing from the recordings. So Pam Bondi got her job based on peddling those conspiracy theories. Tucker Carlson did it. Um, Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, and his assistant Dan Bergano, they are big conspiracy theorists regarding this. Now, all of a sudden that they're in office, the government just released that the Epstein committed suicide and that there was no client list. Now, why is that important? Because in March or February, late February, Pam Bondi got on Fox News and says, I have on my desk a client list of Epstein, and I am going to review it when I get back. Now she comes out this week and said there was no client list. And when they asked her, she said, well, I meant I was going to review the file. And all the MAGA people, Laura Loomer, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, want her fired because they feel she's covering up a client list for a lot of important people in this country who are on that list, who are donors to the Republican Party. Now, you know and I know that Epstein did have a list. That guy is going to always keep a list of the people that he sets up so that he has a calling card that he could call these people on the phone if he needs anything. It seems like the evangelicals now have turned their back on PEPFAR, which was a Christian-based organization, which has saved 26 million lives. This to me doesn't seem like the teaching of Christ, where the two richest men in the world, Musk and Trump, are slashing these programs that help the poor and the needy. It doesn't seem Christ-like to me, and it's certainly not what the Bible teaches. The Supreme Court again sided with Trump in a blockbuster decision by a 6-3 majority that said that last year that the presidents are immune from prosecution while in office, and any decision they make, anything they say regarding its cabinet or done with their cabinet is presumptively immune, and they cannot be prosecuted for it. Now we have this year, the decision allows him to avoid trials on a federal level, at least, for anything dealing with what he does in office. And then a federal judge cannot enjoin him from doing that. So what I have seen happen by this Supreme Court in the last 2 years or 3 years is that they've made the executive branch more powerful than the legislative and the judicial branch. The border crossings in May were nothing. That's how good a job this administration is doing to persuade those in the South American countries not to come to America because you are going to be deported. I think the border crossings in May were for an entire month less than what Biden had in one day, which would be 6,000 people crossing. Israel just got the last Hamas leader who was responsible for the October 7th, 2023 massacre. They also got Sinwar. Remember, he was killed in the chair, and then his brother took over. They just killed his brother. So it would be like if somebody said to me, Eric, we're going to let you be the head of Hamas. I'm going to say, I don't think so. I think I'll turn that down. I'd like staying where I am. Or, if you're in Iran and they're going to make you a general or the new Ayatollah, I think you're going to say, I'd rather just stay a captain or I'll just be a priest. I don't need to be the Ayatollah. The Democrats now are running from Zuhan Madami in New York. It appears there's a lot of things in his history. He gave the middle finger to the Columbus statutes, and now he pissed off 8% of the voting bloc in New York City, which is Italian. He will not renounce the phrase global intifada, which is really death to all Jews worldwide. So while he's a new fresh penny on how he got elected with TikTok and social media, he will drag the Democrats down. Democrats will lose every election if they go far left. The Supreme Court, Canada, here's the next thing. Canada abruptly scraps the digital tax that they were going to put on U.S. technology firms in like 2 days after they enacted it, because Trump said it's a foolish move and I'm going to tariff the heck out of you. So somewhat of these tariffs seem to be keeping some of these nations in line. Now, Trump sent out 30 letters to a lot of nondescript countries, Uzbekistan and some of the Vietnam countries, where he said, look, you haven't cut a deal with me, and therefore this is the tax that I'm going to impose. Um, that's a interesting thing, because Trump said that he gave a 90-day reprieve from Independence Day, of which was April 2nd. And then he was going to, if you didn't cut a deal, you were going to get the tariff on July 9th. Now, Scott Bessinger, the um, he's the Treasury Secretary, excuse me. He said on Sunday that now we're going to give him until September 1st. So the goal lines keep moving. The market can't really gauge what's going to happen. They can't plan. Businesses can't plan. And you're starting to see people really suffer in their businesses that import from other countries. The Kohlberger plea deal, it was the right thing to do. It saved a ton of money on this local county that would have to pay for this, 2-month trial and pay for all these expert witnesses for the government. And it gave certainty that he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. No, he didn't get the death penalty, but he had to admit to committing these murders. But I certainly understand. And it's disappointing to me, and I'm sure, and I know to the families, that the government didn't go to them before they agreed to the plea to discuss it with them and see if they could get on board with it. He saved his own life. It's an irony that he pled guilty to save his own life, but yet he snuffed out the life of those 4 beautiful students in Washington, Iowa. The other thing is, Jimmy Swaggart just died. Jimmy Swaggart, who said, remember famously, "I have sinned." He was the cousin of Jerry Lee Lewis and Mickey Gilley, 2 famous singers. He was caught with a prostitute, not once, but twice. And I think he may have also been, or was that Oral Roberts? One of the two said that they predicted that the world would end on a certain date. And when that date came and didn't end, they came up with some other reasons. Aaron Rodgers said that he's only going to have 1 year left on his career. I still don't know why Pittsburgh would hire him for 1 year. He's so arrogant. He's so fundamentally unlikable, and everybody is sick of him. The South Carolina basketball player, Colin Murray Boyle, whose girlfriend starts also for the USC women's basketball team, she looked ravishing at the draft. And she's going to be drafted next year in the women's league. She's going to be a first-round pick. He got picked as the 9th player in the first round by the Raptors. I think there was only one other USC player that was picked higher. Ronaldo Balkman was picked on the 21st pick, I think, in 2005. But that is going to be, it's interesting to see that he got picked as a 9th pick in the draft. The P. Diddy verdict shocked the heck out of me. I really thought he was going to be found guilty of all counts. And if he wasn't going to be found guilty of the RICO count, I thought he would definitely be found guilty of transportation of women across the state lines and in violation of the Mann Act and some other things. But he got off on the hardest charges. And so he was facing mandatory minimum on the serious charges of over 20 years to life. Some were life. Racketeering would have been life. But they didn't find sex trafficking against him, which is amazing. I mean, he brought escorts over state lines and bought different things off the internet that goes over state lines. So his sentence can be up to 15 or 20 years, but it's 0 to 15. I think he's going to end up with like 5 months or 6 months in prison, although the judge did not grant him bail. And the sentence is going to be not for another 6 months. So he had to remain in jail. I think he should have been let out on jail based on the charges that were that he got convictions on. It really did surprise me. I was disappointed. I think he's a scum of the earth, but maybe the government overreached by trying to try him on a racketeering case. Some of the questions that we have: the NFL team owners secretly agreed to stop offering players fully guaranteed contracts after the Deshaun Watson. You remember Deshaun Watson left Houston Texans. He was, accused of sexually harassing or forcing sex upon himself with a number of masseuse when he would go get massages, and these masseuses, he would make them touch him in a way that was offensive. And he got traded to the Cleveland Browns, and the contract he got was $250 million guaranteed. He's torn his ACL. He's hurt his shoulder. And when he played, he was horrible. So there is collusion now that the contracts, they're going back, that they're not fully guaranteeing all these contracts. Even though you see a $200 million 5-year contract, maybe only 3 will be guaranteed. To me, I think that the league should lose its antitrust exemption. This collusion, they definitely colluded to keep out Colin Kaepernick. And I didn't like him for what he did of kneeling on during the national anthem. I think it's disgustingly offensive. The national anthem is to recognize those people that have fought for us, fought for our freedom and the life that we enjoy. But the NFL definitely colludes, and I think if they continue to do this, they should lose its antitrust exemption. R.J. May's arrest for child sex exploitation charges is amazing to me, that he was able to go through this previous term that ended in June while he was being investigated, and the leadership in the House, Merle, he knew about it, as well as some other people that he served with. I think it's a disgrace. I think that he should have gotten kicked out, and he should have gotten kicked out faster. There could be liability in Texas for the inadequate flood warnings, but let's don't forget, it's 4:00 in the morning. Even if there were these loudspeaker going off every quarter mile or every 150 yards, would people have really have heard it? We should have gotten Amber alerts. I'm sure they were sent out on cell phones. But again, this is an act of God, an act of nature. And sometimes they come on quickly, and you don't know how dangerous it's going to be. Again, do funding cuts to NOAA and NWS expose government liability? They could. They really could, if it's foreseeable that these type of annual rains or annual flooding is going to happen. With $200 million in cuts tied to faulty forecasting and disaster prep, could this open up negligence claims? It could. There's going to be so much litigation from this, not only against the local governments, but against the state of Texas, as well as the federal government. The P. Diddy case, let's talk again about the verdict fallout. Should he have gotten bail after convicted? Yes, absolutely, on the lesser charges. All you have to determine is he a danger to the community, and is he a flight risk? I don't think he would be a danger to the community if you put him under house arrest and you restrict everybody from his house except his family and his lawyer. No guests. And then that way you would know it. And you take his passport, and you put, a guard outside, or you make him hire security guards outside his house. So I definitely think he should get it. He's not being sentenced until October. Yes, in federal court, you don't get sentenced right away. They have to go through, a pretrial sentencing, post-trial sentencing report, and then a recommendation is made to the judge and to the Justice Department. State court, if you're convicted, you get sentenced right away, right when you're sitting. Some jurors are speaking out, saying the media coverage was insulting. I think it is a disgrace. I just don't know how these jurors could listen to what happened. I guess it's normalized that the behavior wasn't shocking to them, or whether they got starstruck. But for the life of me, I just don't understand it. And there were, I think, 7 African American jurors and 5 white jurors. So the whites did as much as the blacks did to vote him not guilty on those. Um, Teens are filming themselves kicking people's door in. If someone gets shot, who's legally responsible? Well, you have a right to the Castle Doctrine says you have the right to protect yourself in your home. If you feel threatened, if somebody does this and kicks your door in and enters your house, you don't know that they have a gun. You don't have a duty to retreat. Now, you can't spring load things. I was in law school and we had these cases where people had cabins in the woods and they were always robbed. And they would use spring-loaded guns that if you opened the door, the gun would come off. You can't do that. But I definitely believe that in the Castle Doctrine, and these kids should stop doing this because it is very dangerous. You can charge these kids and the kids' parents for lack of supervision for trespassing and destruction of property. So that is it for the weekly update. We covered a lot of ground. Let's just everybody be safe. We're getting more rain out there, and I will talk to you next week. Thank you very much. Joanne Meyer said, is the big, beautiful bill going to affect CHIP and marketplace coverages? I do think so. I think that we're going to see a lot of things happening in governmental programs that all of us rely on that we're going to be shocked when it finds out. I did have something I want to go over that came in on my email this morning. Just let me grab to it real quick. Sorry. So one of the things that the big, beautiful bill does is the tax rates are permanent under the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So this is a 70% of the new tax bill, extending and making these taxes permanent. So people like me and yes, I am wealthy, are going to really benefit from this. The ultra wealthy, which I'm not, are going to benefit from it incredibly, much more so than the middle class and those that struggle. Again, there's going to be no tips on tax on tips. They can deduct up to $25,000 for cash tips received, and the deduction phases out with incomes of $150,000 for a single filer and $300,000 for joint filers. No tax on overtime. There's a bonus depreciation where it extends bonus depreciation and increases the amount to 100% for property acquired after 1/19/25. In layman terms, this means that you can immediately expense a big purchase ticket item that you buy. The SALT cap, which is the state income tax, how much can you deduct off? It went from the current $10,000 cap that you can deduct for how much state income tax you can write off to now 40%. The individual deductions were increased for over age 65, allows a charitable deduction for taxpayers who don't itemize their deductions and various other. The state tax exemption has gone to $15 million per person, I think from 11 or 12. So now it's $30 million per couple that is exempted during their lifetime from estate tax. And then there's a new type of retirement tax deferred account called a Trump account, where for American kids, these accounts are similar to IRAs and 529s, and all children born between 1/1/25 and 12/31/28, when he will no longer be in office, will be eligible for a $1,000 seed payment directly. So there's been other changes to the Internal Revenue Code. So everybody go to your accountants or read up on it. There's a lot in there that's beneficial to people, and then there's going to be a lot that's a detriment. My friend Casey Odell says she loves Mickey Gilley, and my Jimmy Swaggart impression cracked her up. That's funny. Okay, y'all, take care.